Hi everyone, welcome to Exams 101 with Scholar Ready. Today we're going to talk about the ACT, and this information is pertinent to folks who are taking the ACT in this Saturday, April 5th, and also Saturday, June 10th. I'll tell you a little bit about Scholar Ready, and then myself, I am Jennifer Ledwith, and I'm the director of Scholar Ready. Scholar Ready has been in existence since 2004, and we prepare students for college entrance exams. That includes the SAT, the ACT, and the PSAT. It also includes helping them to write those personal essays for college scholarships um, and college admissions, and it also includes math tutoring. Let me back up and tell you a little bit about how I got into doing this line of work. When I was a senior in high school, I knew I wanted to go away to college. My classmates, and some of them are my friends on Facebook, my classmates were going away to college, and I mean like away. I'm from the east side of Houston. I finished from North Shore Senior High School, and my classmates were going to Howard and Morehouse and Prairie View and Michigan and Chicago and Harvard. And I was like, I'm going away too. Like, I want to go away to school as well. And I have a twin sister, and at the time, I was a single parent, and my parents couldn't afford to send two girls to college at the same time. But they also make too much money to qualify for financial aid. So we're in the middle, like a lot of people. We make too much money to qualify for need-based financial aid, and we don't have enough money to turn around and write a check to a university every year. And I was determined to go away because I knew that I did not want to go to school in what we affectionately termed back then, saying the 13th grade. When they built North Shore Senior High School, they built it on the same block as Sandy Center College. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But when I was in high school, it was known as the 13th grade. And when you're 16 and 17 years old, you just don't want to go to the 13th grade. The school is basically, they're on the same block, other than a fence separating you from jumping the fence and possibly getting eaten by the alligators in the bayou. It's right there. And I knew I wanted to go away. And I knew I was going to have to apply for scholarships. From the time I was a junior in high school to the time I was a junior in college, I had applied for over 30 scholarships. And I had won about, oh, I can't remember, but I had won enough money for me to go to school with basically no debt. Like, my $64,000 education was not $64,000 to me. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, have a degree from Oklahoma in finance and economics. And I walked out of there with only $1,000 in student loan debt. And the reason that I have $1,000 in student loan debt is because at the time I had a boyfriend and he lived in Houston, and I was done riding the Greyhound bus. We were done riding Greyhound to come and see one another. And I remember, and because Greyhound bus station in Norman, Oklahoma is scary. It's like something from the movie Deliverance. And I decided to strike up a relationship with Southwest Airlines. And that made a big difference. So I had $1,000 in student loan debt, which of course is nothing compared to what my relatives and what my friends and what my colleagues who are my age experience. And I, you know, here I am. I'm thinking this is normal. I'm thinking it's normal to have gone to college, and I had it paid. My tuition and fees are covered by scholarships, and my room and board was covered by working part time. I thought I didn't know that this was an anomaly, and I decided I wanted to start a company that could help students to be able to get scholarships like I did. And I decided I wanted them to be able to get scholarships like I did, and it's been a great experience so far. Ooh, I've been doing this since 2004, and eventually when I first started, I started with math tutoring, and one of my students and I got really good at that. Started doing test preparation and then essays. I'm at this point now where I'm hiring folks to teach a class for me at the University of Houston Clear Lake. ScholarSpot is certainly growing. We have a class that meets at the University of Houston Clear Lake, and that's SAT preparation, and we cover all the sections, and that class meets in the spring, the summer, and the fall. If you're interested in more about those courses, if you register for this course, or even if you didn't, if you have an email, please email me your. Please put your email address in this box, and I will email you and update you on. I'll update you on what we're doing in Clear Lake. So that's a little bit about ScholarSpot. We have a summer program. We have a fabulous summer program beginning in June, and it is going to help students with a couple of things. Number one, it's writing, and it's writing. It's your story well told, which will be writing for personal essays, for admissions applications, and for scholarship applications. You need to get your essays done. Get your essays done during the summertime. That's my aim with that course. Also, we have another course called Read to Write. The purpose of Read to Write is to help students to develop those reading comprehension skills, those writing skills, time management skills, and study skills. So they may be a little younger than the juniors and seniors that may be in your story well told. And again, if you're interested, I'll send you some information about that as well. So we have reading and writing programs this summer. There's also, of course, PSAT prep this summer. The PSAT will be offered in October October, and we'll talk a little more about that at the next session when we talk about SAT in about a month or so. But we have but today we're going to talk about the ACT. Of course, this summer we'll also be preparing students for the ACT and the SAT. We also do a little bit of, believe it or not, TSI, Texas Success Initiative. Just a little bit of preparation can go a long way. Spending a few weeks preparing for that exam can be the difference between spending a semester or two in remedial courses. All right, let's get down to business. Let's talk about let's talk about ACT. ACT is April 5th. And let me just answer some fundamental questions about that pertain to both of these tests, the ACT and the SAT. The first question is, which one should I take? And the answer is, you should take both. Increasingly, the exams have become more similar. For example, the English and language section, or the writing and language section of the SAT is very similar to the writing section of the ACT. So generally speaking, if you prepare for one, then you prepare for the other. Therefore, you should take both. Don't pay attention to rumors that say that certain groups of people do better on one exam than the other. Every student is unique, and one student may do, you may have siblings, and one sibling may perform better on the ACT, and the other one may perform better on the SAT. Just keep that in mind when you're choosing exams. How do you register for the ACT? How do you register for the ACT? You're going to go to actstudent.org. actstudent.org. And actstudent.org is a part of the ACT organization. The ACT administers the ACT. You're going to take the exam on a Saturday for this year. The remaining dates for this year are Saturday, April 5th, Saturday, June 10th. Usually you get your test scores about 2 to 3 weeks after the exam. When you register for the exam, please do this. There is an option for you to order the test booklet as well as the answers for the test. Spend the extra money and order it, because what you see in the books, and as you notice, I have several books on my shelf for SAT and ACT and PSAT. The tests in those practice books approximate the level of difficulty of the exam, but it's not exactly what you will see on the exam. That way, I recommend you order that test booklet if it's available for that particular test date, and use that test booklet to prepare for the next one, because more than likely you will take the ACT again. Now, the ACT will allow you to take the exam up to 12 times. But I don't think, can't think of anyone who should take the ACT 12 times. Most parents will ask me, how many times should we take this exam? You know your child, but I will tell you this: the more they take the exam, the more they get, the more they take the exam, and if their scores stagnate, or if the scores drop, the students will become disenchanted and they will become discouraged. And as someone who prepares students, and as someone who manages people who prepare students for exams for a living, it's not really fun to work with discouraged students. What I recommend you do is I recommend you start taking the exams as early as possible. I think you should start maybe having, well, let me say this. They need to take the exams for the first time no later than the spring of the junior year. So if you are listening and if you have a junior and your junior hasn't taken the ACT, and your junior hasn't taken the ACT, and your junior isn't taking the ACT this Saturday, your junior needs to take the ACT on June 10th. On June 10th. So we've talked about how to register for the exams. We've talked about how you go about ordering test scores, the turnaround, and make sure that you schedule the exam early in advance. A lot of times those slots where you'll take the exams, you're not going to take the exam necessarily at school. You may take it at your school, but you may take it at a school down the street from your school, or you may take it at a local college or university. And I would hate to see a student who goes to Clear Falls have to go and take the exam in Cypress Falls. And for those of my and those folks who are from the Houston metropolitan area can appreciate what it might be like to get on the belt, or to have to get on 45 and then get on 290 on a Saturday morning. All right, so we talked about that. Those are the basics of the exam. Let's talk about all of these exams: PSAT, SAT, and ACT. There are three keys to success on this exam. Three keys to success on this exam. All right, number one. The first key to success is the foundation and the structure. The foundation of every subject on this exam. This exam is comprised of 4 sections. There's writing, there's math, there's science, and there's reading. And there's also an essay component as well. If you have, now, look, if you're a senior and this is your last chance, then you have to focus more on strategies. But for those of you who have younger students, and particularly if you have students who are in the 7th or the 8th grade, this is a great time to pay attention to course selection. For the ACT, it's for the foundation, for the fundamentals of the for the test, it's reading comprehension. You have to have very strong reading comprehension skills. So maybe you want your student to take advanced classes that require more reading than a regular class. For example, an advanced placement or pre-advanced placement social studies class, or an English class. Now, of course, all pre-advanced placement and all AP courses aren't created equally at every school. That's why I recommend that you investigate that class and find out what kind of level of rigor is in the course, and the types of expectations that you will see, because it's going to vary from school to school. I have a student who's in pre-AP English, and he doesn't even read the passages in their entirety because he says that he doesn't need to read all the words. I have a student in advanced placement English who can write an essay that is beautiful in 30 minutes, and he will believe that it is awful. And I just look at him like, this is a really good attempt. These classes, they're not all created equally. So you need to have a very strong reading comprehension background, very, very strong reading comprehension background. And that's going to serve you throughout all of the sections of the exam, even the math section. And as we're talking about the math section, what is the key to success in the math section? The key to success in the math section is that you just have to have a broad knowledge of all of the math that you've taken, I would say from middle school to high school Algebra 2. And when we talk about Algebra 2, it's not let's go take a state exam Algebra 2 or let's go into the computer lab and take Algebra 2. It is real, let's go to college Algebra 2. And we think about that Algebra 2, you think about, you want to make certain that you're going to be able to study a little bit of trigonometry, a little bit about exponential functions, logarithmic functions. Those are going to be some aspects that are on the exam. Okay. So we talk about the basics. So the first basic is the foundation of the exam. Those are the foundations. The second is aspect to success of the exam is strategy. So the first one is foundation. The second is strategy. Strategy. What works for you may not work for everyone else. For example, in class on Saturday, in the SAT class on Saturday, what I will do is I will have a group of students who normally would read the passage first and then answer the questions. I have them do that backwards. I have them read the questions first and then read the passage. And then I have the other group of students who do the opposite to flip-flop. And I have them try different strategies. Now, I have some students who will say, Miss Jennifer, that is not going to work for me. And then I say, okay, well, let's adjust. Let's see what'll work for you. So what's going to work for Susie is not going to work for Bobby. And that's why it's so important to do the third thing, the third aspect of test preparation, and that's practice. You have to practice, and you have to practice in a timed environment. For so many of my students attend public school in the state of Texas. And as you know, they take STAR. And before that, of course, it was TAGS, and before that, it was TOS. And on these exams, students are given quite a bit of time on the exams. For example, I think one of the STAR exams, students will have 4 hours to answer 60 questions. Well, on the ACT, on the math section, you're going to have 60 minutes to answer 60 questions. And that's where the strategies and the practice come into play, because when you have 60 questions to answer in 60 minutes, the strategies are very different from when you're taking a state exam or when you're taking an exam in your regular class, in your math class. So the 3 keys to preparing for any exam: number 1, the fundamentals, the foundations. And if you need to borrow a book, I have several books. You need to learn the foundations of the exam. And number 2, you need to learn the strategies. And number 3, you need to practice. Now let me tell you this. ACT and SAT are a little bit different. The ACT actually changed in September of 2016, but see, the ACT is kind of sneaky. See, compared to the SAT. So the SAT is administered by the College Board, and when the College Board gives an exam, when the College Board changes the exam, they're gonna have a parade, they're gonna turn cartwheels, they're gonna have press releases, they're gonna let you know that the exam is changing in this many years, and these are the changes that you can come to expect. They introduce a new exam with quite a bit of fanfare. The ACT, no, it will not. Let me tell you what happened in September. What I saw was I saw students who had taken the ACT in let's say April or June of 2016, and they did pretty well on exams. And then I saw those same students take the exam in September of 2016, and their scores dropped. Well, largely because the test had changed. It had gotten the test had become harder. So in order for you, so if you're thinking about taking the ACT in the new school year, I would look also, I think they offer the first one in September. Go to actstudent.org and look and keep looking for this. They have a practice packet, like a guide to preparing for the exam, and it'll tell you. So, for example, right now it's 2016, 2017, but the guide is, but they may change the guide once we get to the new academic year. So be looking out for it, because the test was incredibly harder. All right, so So the ACT can be sneaky. That's the difference between the SAT and ACT. So many folks will ask me that. Okay, now let's talk about the different sections of the ACT. Of course, you have reading, you have English, you have science, and you have math. Let us discuss how to go faster on the reading. So this is geared toward my students who are going to take the exam this Saturday, and our parents of students who are going to take the exam this Saturday. Number one, it starts with test prep materials. I have there are a couple of books that I use. Okay, so let's start with the free resource. Number one, let's start with the free resource. You can go to actstudent.org. A as in apple, C as in cat, T as in Tommy, student.org, and select options that will allow you to prepare for the exam. There is a practice exam. There is one practice exam included in that particular on that website. So that's the free option. Print it and practice taking that exam. Now, when you approach the reading section, this is how you approach the reading section. You want to do something called strategic sloth. Yes, I call it strategic sloth. When I started tutoring some time ago, I used to read every word so I could make sure that I could explain everything to my students. And I finally got to a point where I realized I no longer wanted to read every word. So I developed something called strategic sloth, and this is strategic sloth. There are 4 passages on the reading section. There is literary fiction or literary narrative. There's natural science, social science, and humanities. And generally speaking, this will work for each passage. But again, it may not work for everyone, but I've seen it be very successful with scholar-ready students. Read the questions first, and then answer the line reference questions first. So what's a line reference question? Line reference question is, in lines 18 through 21, what did the writer mean by using the phrase, Facebook is awesome? What did the writer mean by that? When you see that, when you see that, go to the passage, go to the line, but don't just read the line. Read above, below, and in between. And because strategic sloth does not force you to read the entire passage, do not skim. Read every word carefully. Read every word carefully. And when you answer the question, you're not going to look at the answer choices. You are going to look at the you're not going to look at the answer choices. You are going to you're going to go to that reading passage, and you're going to put it in your own the answer in your own words. So if your own words are, Facebook is fantastic for people who want to connect with one another. Okay, that's your answer. Now go to the answer choices, A, B, C, D. Whichever answer choice best matches what you just said, that's going to be the right answer. And I know it takes a little practice, it takes a little discipline to do it, but that's going to be the best answer. On the reading section, for each question, there will be 4 answer choices. 3 of them will be distractions, and 1 of them will be the correct answer. That's why going back to the passage and covering up those answer choices, I call it the strategic cover-up, or I call it the consistent cover-up. By consistently covering up the answer choices, you're able to get to where you need to be. All right. So that's okay. So now sometimes it's not necessarily line reference. Sometimes it may not necessarily say lines 14 through 18. Okay. So let's say that there is a passage about the national park system in America, and there is a question specifically about the Grand Canyon. And let's say that you take a quick glance at the passage and you see Grand Canyon, you see Yosemite, you see oh goodness, there's a national park in the Virgin Islands. I can't think of it right now, but you see that in there. Skim the passage. This is when you can skim. Skim the passage. Skim the passage for Grand Canyon, if it's a question about the Grand Canyon. And most likely on the ACT, it's probably going to be 1 or 2 paragraphs about the Grand Canyon in this context. Read both of the paragraphs or one of the paragraphs about Grand Canyon and then formulate your answer based on what you read. So here you've been able to answer when you follow this strategy, you can answer two questions by reading only a small portion of the passage. You can answer two questions correctly by reading a small portion of the passage. And that's why strategic sloth is so awesome. It's so awesome. So you want it with strategic sloth, you answer the line reference questions first. And then you answer those questions that are kind of line reference, but you have to skim to find a line reference. So I would say these are unique elements of the passage. For example, Grand Canyon, that's going to stick out. You're going to be able to skim it. So you have number one, line reference questions that you can skim to find the to find the subject in the passage. And the third thing, the last questions you have are your big idea questions, like your main idea, your purpose. Those kinds of questions you want to answer last. Even if it's question number one, answer the main idea questions last, because once you go through strategic sloth, you will have read, or typically you will have read enough of the passage in order to be able to answer the questions correctly. All right, so when we think about reading, my folks who are taking this exam on, April 8th, taking the exam April 8th, strategic sloth. Read the questions first and then go to the passage. I often ask people, what do you get points for reading the passage or answering the questions correctly? Once you answer that question, I think you will be ready for strategic sloth. The next portion of the exam, let's talk about English. I'm not going to really talk about the essay. The essay is optional. However, I always encourage my students to write the essay, because there may be a program or university or a college that wants to ascertain your writing skills, and they may not necessarily, get it just from the admissions application. So write the essay. It may offer you some more options down the line, and you certainly don't want to have to write it. You don't want to come back during a hectic senior year to sit for an ACT just so you can write an essay. All right. So we're going to just talk about at this point, we're just going to talk about the multiple choice. So you have the English questions, three common types of English questions: grammar. When I think of grammar, I think about punctuation. And punctuation, subject verb agreement, things of that nature. And then the second aspect of second type of question is usage questions. And the third is a rhetorical skills. Grammar. You can do better on the ACT English section if you can recognize subjects and their predicates in sentences. If you write a sentence and you have a difficult time identifying the subject and its verb, or the subject and its predicate, you will have a difficult time on the ACT. And I have parents nodding and shaking their heads, and they know that their students cannot identify the subjects and verbs, simply because students don't really work on that in high school as much as they used to. And I know some of you are thinking about the good old days when we could diagram sentences. Well, those days are no longer here. Those days are no longer here. That means you need to get a book, and practice that grammar. Okay. So the big part about grammar is, of course, subject verb agreement, and you have to be able to recognize the subject and the verb before you can find agreement. The next aspect of it is punctuation. When is it appropriate to use a comma? When is it appropriate to use a semicolon? When is it appropriate to use a colon or a dash? You have to practice you have to go back and review those grammar rules. The second aspect after grammar is usage. And usage generally is about eliminating wordiness. And often, now this isn't always true, but often on the ACT, I'm going to tell you this, usually the correct answer is the shortest answer. And we think about rhetorical skills, that goes back to reading comprehension. What you have to be able to identify the purpose of a particular sentence or a particular paragraph in a passage. The English section, one tricky thing about the English section, once you get past the grammar and the usage and the rhetorical skills, is the time. It's the time. On the exam, you have 45 minutes to answer 75 questions, with 5 passages that are 15 minutes each. And often students will run out of time. Now, let me tell you how you avoid that. Read the answer choices first, and then go back and try to find and then go to the passage. That's a strategy that is very useful. All right, so English questions. 3 common English questions. You have grammar, usage, and rhetorical skills. All right, so let's talk about science. Science for people who do not like science. Science for people who do not like science. The good news is science is a reading test. And if you can read, you can do anything. If you can read, you can do anything. Science is a reading test. We think about 3 different types of questions on the ACT science section. There are, in the ACT science section is 40 questions. You have experiments. You have questions that are just general charts and graphs without experiments. And the third part of it is you have opposing viewpoints. On the ACT, at least usually there will be at least just one opposing viewpoints. And then you'll have, a couple of experiments and then a couple of general charts and graphs questions. How do you approach these? Okay, I'm going to talk about experiments and general charts and graphs first. Read the questions first. Read the questions first, and then return to the experiment or the study or the chart and the graph to get what you need. And when you examine the experiment, you need to be figuring out, usually with experiments, there's a hypothesis. You need to be able to identify the hypothesis. So what is it that the person is trying to prove? What are they testing? And usually in the experiment, there's a cause and there's an effect. And the cause and effect is going to be evident in the text of the passage. It's going to be evident in the chart. It's going to be evident in the graph. You need to look at the general charts and graphs and the experiments and pay attention to cause and effect. And I know for my folks who do not like science, I know it's dull, but just be nosy. Just be nosy and just think, okay, what's the cause? What's the effect? What's the cause? What's the effect? With experiments and with general charts and graphs, you need to be able to identify the cause and effect. Now, when we talk about questions with those graphs and those charts, usually there will be an x-axis and a y-axis. Make certain that you pay attention to the labels on the axes. You also want to pay attention to the charts because those charts, that data, the data are not presented in a way that is user-friendly. And you have to pay attention to that. It's not going to necessarily be in increasing order or decreasing order. It's going to be in whatever order the ACT writers chose for that particular question. Pay attention to graphs and charts and experiments. The last part of the exam, I would say, is opposing viewpoints. Usually, if you see 2 passages without a picture, a chart, a graph, it's opposing viewpoints. And especially if you see one scenario, if you see 2 or more scenarios, it's opposing viewpoints. When you read opposing viewpoints, this is how you want to approach it. Usually there will be scientist A and scientist B. Think about scientist A and scientist B as colleagues. Think of them as colleagues. And if you put them in a room, what would they agree about? And then also if you put them in a room, what would they not agree about? That's going to help you because generally speaking, on opposing viewpoints, on average, they'll have some questions that are pretty much detailed questions where you can read what scientist A is saying and read what scientist B is saying and just pick up the details and answer it. But what will really give you that edge is being able to understand the similarities between each scientist's argument and understanding the differences between those arguments. Okay, so that's science. We've spoken about science, English, and reading. Now let's talk about multiple choice. Let's talk about multiple choice, using multiple choice to your advantage in the math section. Multiple choice to your advantage in the math section. Okay, okay. The math section, you have 60 minutes to answer 60 questions. Before you start reading, and before you start working out math, and before you start picking up calculators, pay attention to the multiple choice, because sometimes you can make an educated guess based on the answer choices. And sometimes it seems as though that's what the ACT folks want you to do, because 60 questions in 60 minutes, that's not enough time to show 18 steps in solving an equation. And with math, again, it's as opposed to the SAT and the PSAT, ACT math is about terminology. You need to go back and review terminology. For example, do you know what an integer is? Do you know what a whole number is, or a real number, or a non-real number, or a rational number, or an irrational number? Do you know what those items are? Do you understand union and intersection? The ACT just covers a wide variety of questions. And I'll tell you, there's this one question that has really, I've seen it in the guide, in the 2016-17 guide that they posted on the ACT website, and I've also seen it in a released exam, because I have one of my students released exams. And it's a word problem that involves measurement. And on the ACT, you can bring a calculator, but you can't bring an index card with formulas. And there are formulas that you need to know on that test. So you need to go back and brush up on volume of a sphere, and a prism, and area and surface area, and area and circumference, because you will not get that on the ACT. Pythagorean theorem, you just need to go into the test and memorize it, and use the multiple choice as your guide to determine how much work you need to do. Okay. All right. Well, I do want to talk with you about the next steps. Please, if you are taking your exam this Saturday, please order the test booklet if it is available. Pay a little extra money, order the test booklet, because that will help you if you choose to take the exam again. Scholar Ready is preparing students for the June exam. We are preparing students for the June exam. We meet students on Skype. We meet students on Skype. This is my office slash Facebook Live studio, and myself and other tutors, we meet students through Skype. It's awesome because most of my students are involved in some activity, whether it's sports or choir or band or any number of clubs. They work, and this allows us to have the flexibility to be able to meet because they can have very erratic schedules. So we are tutoring for the June exam. There's also the SAT workshop. We're going to do this again on May 2nd for the ACT that will be the SAT that will be given on May 2nd. So if you're interested in learning more, please type in your email address into this box so I may have it. Again, my name is Jennifer Ledwith, Director of Scholar Ready, and it's time for your next level. Thank you so much for attending today's session.